What makes this place so special is that they watch me every day. They see how hard I work. They see how I carry myself as a human being, and they know me. I'm very disappointed with the communication that's been had.
Letting great players get out of the building, just like I said earlier in the week.
So the Cincinnati Bengals pretty much did their best Dallas Cowboys impression over the past year. I mean, they had huge free agents that they had to pay in Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and Trey Hendrickson. They also had to extend Joe Burrow within the past 2 years. And ultimately, the way this was done was very poorly executed. The first person to get a contract extension was Joe Burrow, who originally said that he would have no problem taking a pay cut in order to keep the core nucleus of the Cincinnati Bengals together. But ultimately, in September of 2023, he decided to reset the quarterback market, signing a 5-year, $275 million contract, which ultimately made things a lot more difficult for the Cincinnati Bengals. The Bengals then decided to wait a year to figure out what they're going to do with T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. When Jamar Chase was eligible for a contract extension, they decided to wait again, deciding that Jamar Chase was a very inconsistent wide receiver and that he wouldn't be able to replicate his numbers from 2023 and 2024. And to be honest, if anyone has ever had Jamar Chase in fantasy football, you know what I'm talking about. In 2022, he had 9 TDs. In 2023, he had 7 TDs. And this is speaking purely from a fantasy football perspective. He's always been a really good wide receiver. And I guess since the Bengals saw the contract that Jamar Chase's former LSU teammate Justin Jefferson got and the contract that CeeDee Lamb got, they were hoping that he would slightly regress in this upcoming season so they could save some money. And boy, were they wrong. Jamar Chase had the best season of his career, gaining over 1,700 receiving yards, 17 touchdowns, and for the first time in his career, he was named as an AP First Team All-Pro. In the meantime, the Bengals were consistently franchise tagging T. Higgins, and eventually, fans assumed that something had to give here. And there wasn't any logical resolution to the situation. I mean, when you asked Joe Burrow what the Bengals needed to do, he would give delusional responses like this.
We started this whole thing together. We came in together and we built this thing from the ground up. You don't want to make a habit of letting great players get out of the building, just like I said earlier in the week. T's a great player, does everything the right way. You just can't let him get out of the building.
Meanwhile, Jamar Chase was straightforward with what he was doing, saying that he was just toying with the Cincinnati Bengals because of how comical this situation was.
Yeah, it's possible. It's 100% possible, you know. You gotta play chess in that situation, but it's possible.
Joe Burrow would continue to be delusional, saying that they can get it done.
Have the faith in the Brown family and the Bengals organization so that they don't waste these prime years of a generational quarterback?
Yeah, I do. We have the cap space to get it done.
Right.
Everybody involved, Trey, T, Jamar, Mike G, we all want to stay together. You know, you can get those things done.
And probably my favorite part about all this is Joe Burrow not only wanted Jamar Chase and T. Higgins to return, but he wanted the Bengals to somehow bring back Trey Hendrickson.
Like you said, we need Trey back. We need to give him what he's worth and what he deserves. He's earned that. We need our young guys to come on. We need to draft well. We don't have time to wait around.
Right. We got to keep Jamar Chase, T. Higgins,
Trey Hendrickson.
You got to keep a whole bunch. You confident that they're going to be willing to keep all of those guys?
The cap is going up each year. You know, we all want to stay together, so we're all going to do what it takes to do that. They're going to be paid what they're worth, whether we do it or somebody else. The guys are going to get paid that need to get paid, and so it's a big offseason for the Bengals.
Now, the Bengals would sign Jamar Chase and T. Higgins at the very exact same time, resetting the market at the wide receiver position once again, paying Jamar Chase an AAV of $40 million and T. Higgins a 4-year, $115 million contract. Ultimately, I thought this was a terrible decision, but the Cincinnati Bengals' hands were tied here. Jamar Chase and T. Higgins had the same agent, and the agent told the Bengals that these two were a package deal. The ideal situation here would have been to just tag T. Higgins and trade him to a team where he could be the wide receiver 1 for that team. T. Higgins could then sign a contract extension with his new team and potentially be more prolific on that new team. Then he could hit the open market again in 2 or 3 years from now and then sign another large contract. But ultimately, T. Higgins was content with the Cincinnati Bengals and the Bengals were content paying him. I would have personally preferred to trade T. Higgins and then draft a rookie wide receiver in the first round of the NFL draft just so you could save that that money. Now, there's been times in NFL history where that's worked out really well. Say, for instance, when the Minnesota Vikings traded Stephon Diggs to the Buffalo Bills for the pick that became Justin Jefferson. That ended up working out remarkably for both teams. And then there have been times where this strategy has not worked out at all whatsoever, like when the Tennessee Titans traded A.J. Brown to the Philadelphia Eagles for the pick that became Treylon Burks. But in this case, the risks weren't that high. You're not trading your top wide receiver that your offense is built around here. You're trading your wide receiver 2 for a potential first or second round pick, so you could reinvest that money elsewhere. And ultimately, that's not what the Bengals did. And things would get really bad primarily because there's one major player that they still haven't signed yet. If you guys have been paying attention to the Cincinnati Bengals over this past year, they've had one of the best offenses in the entire NFL and one of the worst defenses in the entire NFL. The Bengals finished 25th in both yards allowed per game and points per game last year. So you would expect that this team would invest as much capital as humanly possible in their defense, but it seemed like they didn't really care very much. They finished with a 9-8 record, and obviously if they improved their defense a little bit, then this team could have potentially made a run for contention in the AFC. And if you take a look at the Bengals over the past 2 seasons, when Trey Hendrickson is off of the football field in 294 dropbacks, the Bengals ranked last in the NFL in success, completion rate, EPA per attempt, passer rate, and pressure rate. Whenever Trey Hendrickson was on the field in 909 dropbacks, they were number 8 in success, completion rate, EPA per attempt, passer rating, and pressure rate. And when you take a look at Trey Hendrickson's statistics, it doesn't take a genius to know that the Bengals need to bring him back. I mean, Trey Hendrickson was a very solid player for the New Orleans Saints, and the Cincinnati Bengals bet big on him when they decided to sign him in the 2021 offseason. And ever since then, Trey Hendrickson has been a perennial Pro Bowler. And over the past 2 years, he had his 2 best seasons to date, with 17.5 sacks in 2023 and in 2024. When you consider how terrible the Bengals defense is, there's no question that Trey Hendrickson was the top priority in this offseason, or at least priority number 2 in the offseason. But it seemed like the Bengals didn't really care so much, which resulted in Hendrickson saying stuff like this.
You know, you don't want to become a distraction for the team, because inevitably the goal is to win a Super Bowl for Cincinnati. If it's something that we can agree on in terms, that would be great. Ideally, my wife and I would love to stay in Cincinnati. If it's something that helps the Bengals win a Super Bowl, if they get picks or anything, I want to help win a Super Bowl for Cincinnati if I'm there or not.
And this is where things get a little interesting here. As Andrew Whitworth mentioned how tough of a situation the Cincinnati Bengals truly are in.
The Bengals are never going to, issue out lots of guarantees and contracts. And unfortunately, they've just continued to be way behind times in that spot. You're going to always get left behind in these situations. Continuously, they've let big free agents leave, but then they've also not been able to replace them. Make a decision. Pay the guy, move on from the guy, but stop letting it just linger in the locker room.
And as the Bengals waited throughout the offseason, things would just get worse. Max Crosby would get a brand new contract, and then Myles Garrett would reset the edge rusher position. Now the top edge rusher in the NFL is making $40 million a year, and Trey Hendrickson still doesn't have a contract, and things would really hit the fan on Tuesday when Trey Hendrickson would get a text message from his head coach Zach Taylor 30 days before mandatory minicamp, warning that he'd be fined if he didn't show up. Something that frustrated Trey Hendrickson, especially given the poor communication from the team throughout the offseason. Hendrickson also made it clear he will not play under the final year of his current contract, and things would get really awkward here as Trey Hendrickson would show up to practice and explain his situation.
I wouldn't be standing here with you if I got the deal in January. I'm very disappointed with the communication that's been had. What makes this place so special is that they watch me every day. They see how hard I work. They see how I carry myself as a human being, and they know me. It stinks when the value somewhere else, whether it was 1, 2, 3 first-round picks, I had no idea. It gave me the fortunate circumstance to see my value elsewhere. I'm hoping it doesn't come to that. I truthfully will put my hope in that.
And honestly, I don't blame him for behaving the way he's been behaving. This is his last opportunity to get a huge payday in the NFL at age 30, coming off of 2 of the best seasons of his career. So saying that he will not risk injury and he won't play without a contract makes a lot of sense. Unfortunately, he did say that the relationship is repairable.
I think every relationship is repairable, right? Like
I think Myles Garrett proved that. It's just the uncomfortable business side that we've unfortunately had to deal with for the last couple years.
But the Bengals' decisions over this past offseason suggests that they would be open to trading Trey Hendrickson. And to be honest, at this point, they might not have much of a choice because they don't have the cap space to keep him. If you take a look at the Bengals' NFL draft picks, the Bengals selected Shamar Stewart out of Texas A&M with the 17th overall pick. So you might think this is a replacement for Trey Hendrickson, but to be honest, Shamar Stewart was primarily known as a run-stopping edge rusher coming out of Texas A&M. Now, in the past, we have seen plenty of edge rushers who came out of the NFL draft as run-stopping edge rushers eventually become very prolific at rushing the QB. The primary player that comes to mind is DeMarcus Lawrence, formerly of the Dallas Cowboys, currently of the Seattle Seahawks. They would also go linebacker in the second round, selecting Demetrius Knight Jr. from South Carolina. Then they would also draft another linebacker in the fourth round, Barrett Carter out of Clemson. So it was very clear that the Bengals wanted to make drafting an edge rusher or defense in general a huge focal point in this year's NFL draft, but their hands are currently tied, and it's as a result of the amount of money Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins ended up taking. So you might be asking, what is the most likely resolution here for the Cincinnati Bengals and Trey Hendrickson? And I would say the most likely resolution here is Trey Hendrickson gets traded to a team that has the cap space to pay him. A team like the New England Patriots, who have had an incredible offseason, comes to mind. They currently have $68.5 million in salary cap space. You could definitely get a first round pick for a player that has had 2 straight seasons of 17.5 sacks going into his age 30 season. But if the Bengals could get a second round pick for Hendrickson or multiple picks in return, then they would be considered as winners in this particular instance. The Bengals really don't have much of a choice but to trade him at this point, and it's because they really don't have cap space. They already used up all of that cap space on T. Higgins, Joe Burrow, and Jamar Chase, which didn't really make much sense because their defense is their weakest point of their team. Other teams that could potentially trade for Trey Hendrickson are the San Francisco 49ers. They have $47 million in salary cap space. The Las Vegas Raiders have $43.2 million in cap space. The Detroit Lions have $42.8 million in cap space, and the Tennessee Titans have $39.2 million in cap space. So all those teams could potentially make a run at Trey Hendrickson. But honestly, this situation just goes to show the ineptitude of the Cincinnati Bengals front office because they completely mismanaged this situation. And as a result, their defense is going to get even weaker next year, and they might miss the playoffs once again as a result of it. Let me know what you guys think about all this in the comment section down below. Aside from that, I don't know if you guys heard, but the Bengals division rival Cleveland Browns are currently having some issues with their first round pick in rookie minicamp. We made a completely separate video, and I'll leave it in the end screen. I'll meet you guys there. I'm your boy Mike, and I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.